The blood on Penelope Zimmerman's hands had long since dried when she realized the whispers at the mercantile were about her. And in that moment, her entire world in Porterville, California, crumbled like the brittle earth beneath the unforgiving summer sun of 1882. She had been standing near the bolts of fabric, running her fingers over a piece of blue calico she could no longer afford, when Mrs. Henderson's voice carried through the narrow aisles with deliberate clarity. Such a shame about that Zimmerman girl. No husband, no ring, and in her condition. Her poor mother must be mortified. Penelope's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, still flat beneath her simple cotton dress. She was only 2 months along, had barely confirmed her suspicions with the doctor just 3 days prior. The father, Marcus Sullivan, had promised her marriage, promised her everything under those stars by the creek. Then his family had moved their cattle operation to Montana, and he had gone with them without so much as a goodbye. She had received one letter since, brief and cold, making it clear she was now alone with the consequences of their love. "I heard she was carrying on with that Sullivan boy before he left," another voice chimed in, belonging to Sarah Mitchell, whose own daughter was about Penelope's age of 21. What kind of girl does such a thing? The kind who believed in promises, Penelope thought bitterly. The kind who thought love meant something. She abandoned the fabric and walked toward the counter, head held high despite the burning in her throat. Mr. Peterson, who had known her since childhood, could barely meet her eyes as he tallied her meager purchases. Flour, salt, a small tin of lard. The basics she needed to keep herself and her ailing mother fed. "That will be $1.15, Miss Zimmerman," he said, his voice oddly formal. He had always called her Penny before. She counted out the coins carefully, aware of every eye boring into her back. When she turned to leave, the small cluster of women near the fabric section fell silent, their expressions ranging from pity to outright contempt. Mrs. Henderson actually turned her back, and Sarah Mitchell pulled her daughter closer, as if unwed pregnancy might be contagious. The August heat slammed into Penelope as she stepped onto the wooden sidewalk, her packages clutched against her chest. Porterville was a town of barely 800 souls, nestled in the San Joaquin Valley where the earth was rich, but the social rules were rigid as iron. Everyone knew everyone, and secrets lasted about as long as morning dew. She made her way down Main Street, past the saloon where men loitered in the shade, past the church where Reverend Thomas had delivered his sermon just 2 days ago about the sins of the flesh and the fallen women who would drag good communities into moral decay. She had not missed the way his gaze had landed on her during that particular passage, though she had not yet begun to show, someone had told. Either the doctor or his nurse, despite their supposed oath of confidentiality. In a town this small, such oaths were merely suggestions. Her mother was sitting in her rocking chair when Penelope arrived home, the small house they rented on the edge of town feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. Catherine Zimmerman had been beautiful once, but years of hard labor after Penelope's father died had worn her down to angles and exhaustion. The cough that rattled her chest was getting worse, and the medicine from the doctor cost more than they could spare. "They know," Penelope said quietly, setting the packages on the scarred kitchen table. Her mother's rocking stopped. "How many?" "Everyone, I think, the way they looked at me in the mercantile." Penelope sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted despite the morning hour. "Mrs. Henderson made sure I heard every word." Catherine was silent for a long moment, her weathered hands gripping the arms of her chair. "You will have to leave," she finally said, her voice heavy with resignation. "Go to San Francisco, tell people you are a widow. You can start over there." "I cannot leave you. You are sick and there is no one else to care for you. I will manage. You will die, Penelope said bluntly. Without someone to cook and clean and earn money, you will die. I am staying. Then we will both become outcasts in this town. They will not let you work anywhere respectable. No one will hire a woman in your condition, not when they know the circumstances. Penelope knew this was true. She had been working as a seamstress for Mrs. Crawford, taking in mending and making dresses for the more prosperous families. That income would vanish once the word spread, if it had not vanished already. And the word had definitely spread. The afternoon brought confirmation. A boy of perhaps 12 appeared at their door with a note from Mrs. Crawford. The message was brief and impersonal, stating that her services would no longer be required due to circumstances that made her continued employment inappropriate. There would be no final payment for the work already completed. Penelope sat at the kitchen table as the sun dipped lower, watching shadows creep across the floor, and wondered how she would survive. Her savings amounted to less than $20. Her mother's medicine cost $3 a bottle, and they needed at least one bottle a week. Rent was $8 a month. Food, coal for winter, clothes as her body changed. The mathematics of desperation painted a bleak picture. That evening, Mrs. Henderson arrived with Reverend Thomas in tow. Catherine answered the door while Penelope remained seated at the table, her spine straight and her chin lifted in defiance she did not truly feel. "Mrs. Zimmerman," the Reverend began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of the pulpit, "I am here out of concern for the moral welfare of our community." "Then you should be concerning yourself with the man who abandoned my daughter, not with condemning her for being deceived by false promises," Catherine replied, her voice sharp despite the cough that followed. Mrs. Henderson's lips pursed. "Your daughter's situation is a stain upon decent society. There are homes for girls like her, places where she can have the child in privacy and then give it up for adoption to a proper family." "I am not giving up my child," Penelope said, speaking for the first time. "And I am not leaving." "Then you force us to take measures," Reverend Thomas said. "The congregation cannot condone such behavior. You will not be welcome at services, and I will be advising the business owners of our town to refuse you employment and service. Perhaps that will encourage you to seek the redemption available to you elsewhere." "You would starve us out," Catherine said, incredulous. "I would protect the moral fabric of this community from corruption," the Reverend corrected. "The choice is Miss Zimmerman's to make." They left without waiting for further argument, and through the window, Penelope watched them walk down the dusty road toward town, their dark figures stark against the orange sunset. "We will have to sell everything," Catherine said quietly. "The furniture, my wedding ring, anything of value." "Then you will take that money and go north." "No." Penelope stood, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I will find work somehow. There must be someone in this valley who needs help and does not care about gossip." But the next 2 days proved her wrong. She walked to every farm within 5 miles, offering to do anything from milking cows to mucking stables. Doors closed in her face. Men who had known her father refused to meet her gaze. Women clutched their children and turned away. The word had spread like wildfire through the valley, carried by church members and righteous gossips, and Penelope Zimmerman was now officially untouchable. On the 3rd day, with less than $1 in coins left and her mother's medicine running dangerously low, Penelope walked to the far edge of the valley where the land began to rise toward the Sierra foothills. There was one ranch out here she had not yet tried, primarily because she had heard the owner was a recluse who did not welcome visitors. The Kiernan Ranch was larger than most in the area, sprawling across good grazing land with a creek running through it. The house was well maintained, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch, and the barns were in excellent repair. Cattle dotted the hillsides, fat and healthy, and she could see two cowhands working with horses in a far corral. She walked up the long drive, her worn boots raising small clouds of dust, and climbed the porch steps with her heart hammering against her ribs. Before she could knock, the door opened. The man who stood there was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in shadow. He wore working clothes, denim and worn cotton, and there was dirt under his fingernails from honest labor. He looked to be perhaps 27 or 28, and there was something guarded in his expression. "Help you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "My name is Penelope Zimmerman. I am looking for work, any work. I can cook, clean, mend, handle livestock. I am a hard worker, and I will take any wage you think fair." His gaze traveled over her, assessing but not unkind. "You are the girl from town everyone is talking about." Her heart sank. "Yes, the one who is pregnant and unmarried. Yes." He was quiet for a moment, leaning against the doorframe. "Why would I hire you when half the valley is probably waiting for me to turn you away so they can feel righteous about it?" "Because I am desperate," Penelope said honestly, too tired for pride. "Because my mother is sick and needs medicine I cannot afford. Because I will work harder than any man you could hire, and I will be grateful for the chance." What happened to the father? He made promises he did not keep, and then moved to Montana with his family. "You write and tell him about the baby." "I sent 3 letters. He has not responded to any of them." Harrison Kiernan studied her for another long moment, and Penelope forced herself to meet his gaze, to let him see that she was not ashamed of loving unwisely, only of being abandoned for it. "I have a housekeeper," he finally said. "Mrs. Chen, who comes 3 times a week, but I could use someone to help with cooking and general work around the house daily. The work is hard, the hours are long, and the pay is $12 a month plus room and board." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. $12 was not generous, but it was survival. "Room and board? You mean I would live here, in the small house out back? It used to be the foreman's quarters before he retired. 2 rooms, a stove, a bed. You would take your meals in the main house kitchen. You would work from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week. Sundays you can rest or go to town if you want, though I am guessing town is not particularly welcoming right now. Why would you do this?" Penelope asked, searching his face for ulterior motives. "Everyone else has turned me away." "Because everyone else is more concerned with appearing righteous than actually being decent," Harrison said. "And because I know what it is like to be judged for circumstances beyond your control." "Do you want the job or not?" "Yes. Yes, absolutely. But my mother, she is sick and cannot manage alone in town. Is there any way she could come here too? I would work twice as hard. I would do anything." Harrison sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The foreman's house has 2 rooms. I suppose she could take the bedroom and you could sleep in the front room until other arrangements can be made. But if she is as sick as you say, she will need doctoring. I will pay for it from my wages. We will figure it out. Go get your mother and your things. Be back before dark." Penelope wanted to hug him, to weep with relief, but she simply nodded and turned to hurry back down the drive. Behind her, she heard the door close, and she sent up a silent prayer of thanks to whatever merciful force had brought her to Harrison Kiernan's ranch. The walk back to town seemed shorter despite her exhaustion. Catherine was dozing in her chair when Penelope burst through the door, breathless and flushed. "Pack everything we can carry," Penelope said. "We are leaving." Her mother's eyes opened slowly. "Leaving to where?" "The Kiernan Ranch. Harrison Kiernan hired me as a housekeeper and is letting us both stay in the foreman's cottage. $12 a month and meals included. Catherine struggled to sit up straighter. That ranch is miles from town. We will be completely isolated. We are already isolated. At least there we will have food and shelter and income. Penelope was already moving through the small house, gathering their few possessions. Clothes, her mother's medicines, the photograph of her father, her sewing kit, the quilts from the beds. Everything fit into 2 worn carpet bags and a wooden crate. They left the rented furniture behind, along with the dishes and pots that belonged to the landlord. Penelope paid their final rent with almost the last of her money, leaving them with 73 cents and a long walk ahead. Catherine could not walk the full distance, so Penelope left her resting under a tree at the edge of town and hurried to the livery stable. The owner, Mr. Garrett, was one of the few men who had not openly shunned her, though his wife was among the town's most vocal moralists. "I need to rent a wagon for a few hours," Penelope said, "just to move my mother and our belongings to the Kiernan ranch." Mr. Garrett looked uncomfortable. "I heard Harrison hired you. That surprised some folks." "I am sure it did. Can I rent the wagon? I have 73 cents. I can pay the rest from my first wages." He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "Keep your money. I will drive you and your mother out there myself. My wife does not need to know about it." The kindness nearly undid her. "Thank you." They loaded Catherine and the bags into the wagon bed, making her as comfortable as possible on a pile of empty feed sacks. The sun was beginning its descent as Mr. Garrett urged the horses forward, and Penelope sat beside him on the bench, watching Porterville recede behind them. "My wife is a good woman," Mr. Garrett said after a long silence, "but she gets caught up in what other people think. Half the town is the same way. They forget that mercy is supposed to be part of religion too. I appreciate you helping us despite the risk to your reputation. Harrison Kiernan is a good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is fair and honest. You will be safe out there." They arrived at the ranch as the sky was turning purple. Harrison came out of the house when he heard the wagon, and he helped carry Catherine to the small cottage while Penelope and Mr. Garrett brought in their belongings. The cottage was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and plank floors. The bedroom held a brass bed frame with a decent mattress, and the front room had a small stove, a table with 2 chairs and space enough for a bedroll. Windows on 3 sides let in the evening breeze. "There are linens in the chest," Harrison said, gesturing to a trunk against one wall. "And Mrs. Chen left some basic supplies in the kitchen. Come up to the main house once you get your mother settled. I will have supper ready." After Mr. Garrett departed with wishes of good luck, Penelope made up the bed for her mother and helped her settle in. Catherine's breathing was labored from the journey, and worry gnawed at Penelope's stomach. "Rest," she said, smoothing the quilt over her mother's thin frame. "I will bring you something to eat soon." The main house kitchen was large and well organized, with a modern cast iron stove and a pump that brought water directly inside. Harrison was stirring something in a pot, and the smell of beef stew made Penelope's mouth water. She had not eaten a proper meal in days. "Sit," Harrison said, nodding toward the long table. "It is almost ready." Penelope sank into a chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "You did not have to cook. That is supposed to be my job now. You can start tomorrow. Tonight you look like you might fall over." He ladled stew into 2 bowls and set one in front of her along with a hunk of bread. The food was simple but well made, and Penelope ate with an enthusiasm that probably was not ladylike but could not be helped. "Your mother needs a doctor," Harrison said after a few minutes. "I will ride into town tomorrow and bring Doc Wilson out here. I cannot pay him until I have wages. I will pay him. You can work it off if that makes you feel better about it." Penelope set down her spoon. Why are you being so kind to us? You do not know me. For all you know, everything they are saying in town is true and worse. Harrison was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. 5 years ago, my sister found herself in a situation similar to yours. The man who got her pregnant was married, though she did not know it until after. When the truth came out, his wife's family ran my sister out of Sacramento. She ended up in a charity hospital in San Francisco, and she died there along with her baby. His voice was flat, but Penelope could hear the pain underneath. I am sorry. I was working a ranch in Nevada at the time. Did not find out until months later, when it was all over. I sold everything I had and came back to California, bought this place, and swore I would never turn away someone who needed help just because society decided they were not respectable enough. He met her gaze. So that is why I hired you. Now eat your supper before it gets cold. They finished the meal in companionable silence, and Harrison filled a bowl for Penelope to take to her mother. As she stood to leave, he stopped her with a question. The baby's father. Do you still love him? Penelope considered the question honestly. I love who I thought he was, but that person apparently never existed, so no, I suppose I do not love Marcus Sullivan anymore. I am just angry that I believed his lies. Anger is better than grief. It keeps you moving forward. She carried the stew back to the cottage, fed her mother, and then made up her own bed on the floor with the quilts they had brought. Through the window, she could see lights still burning in the main house, and beyond that, the vast darkness of the valley stretching toward the mountains. For the first time in weeks, Penelope slept without crying. The next morning, she woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and the low of cattle. Her back ached from sleeping on the floor, but she dressed quickly in her work clothes and checked on her mother, who was still sleeping. The main house kitchen was empty when she arrived, but there was a fire already going in the stove and a pot of coffee on the back burner. Penelope found eggs in the cold cellar, bacon in the smokehouse, and fresh bread wrapped in cloth. She set about making breakfast, and by the time Harrison came in from the barn with 2 of his ranch hands, there was food on the table. This is Sam and Lewis, Harrison said, introducing the 2 men. Sam was older, weathered and lean, while Lewis was younger with kind eyes and an easy smile. They work the ranch with me. This is Miss Zimmerman, who will be helping with the house. Both men nodded politely, and if they had heard the gossip from town, they gave no sign of it. They ate quickly and headed back out to work, leaving Harrison to finish his coffee. Doc Wilson will be here around noon, he said. I am riding into town now. Is there anything you need while I am there? My mother's medicine. I have the bottle so the pharmacist knows what to give you, but I do not have money for it yet. I told you I would pay it. We will settle accounts later. After he left, Penelope threw herself into work. She scrubbed the kitchen from ceiling to floor, washed every dish and cup, organized the pantry, and started bread rising for the evening meal. Mrs. Chen arrived mid-morning, a tiny Chinese woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. You are the new girl, she said, looking Penelope up and down. The one with the baby coming. Yes, Mrs. Chen nodded. Good. This house needs more life in it. Mr. Harrison is too much alone. You work hard, you be fine here. They spent the morning working together, and Penelope found Mrs. Chen's company refreshing. The older woman did not ask prying questions or make judgmental comments. She simply worked, humming occasionally, and showed Penelope where everything was kept. Doc Wilson arrived shortly after noon in his black buggy. He was an older man with graying hair and a no-nonsense manner that Penelope remembered from his office visits. I am here to check on your mother, he said without preamble. Harrison said she has a persistent cough. Penelope led him to the cottage, where Catherine was awake and sitting up in bed. The doctor's examination was thorough, and his expression grew increasingly grave. "It is consumption," he finally said, confirming what Penelope had feared. "Advanced, but not yet terminal. She needs rest, good food, fresh air, and medicine twice daily. I will leave you enough for a month, and I will check on her weekly." "How much will that cost?" Penelope asked, her stomach nodding. "Harrison is covering it. He said to tell you not to argue." The doctor packed his instruments back into his bag. "Your mother also needs to know about your condition. The stress of hiding it is not good for either of you." After he left, Penelope sat beside her mother's bed. "He said you have consumption." "I already knew that." Catherine's voice was weak but steady. "What I do not understand is why Harrison Kiernan is paying for an expensive doctor and medicine for a woman he does not know." Penelope explained about Harrison's sister, about his bitterness toward the judgment of righteous society. Her mother listened quietly, tears sliding down her thin cheeks. "He is a good man," Catherine finally said. "Do not take his kindness for granted." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Penelope rose before dawn and worked until after dark, cooking 3 meals a day for Harrison and his men, cleaning the house, tending a vegetable garden behind the cottage, doing laundry, and helping her mother as she slowly regained strength on the doctor's regimen. Harrison was often gone from sunup to sundown, working cattle or mending fences or breaking horses. When he was in the house, he was quiet but not unfriendly, often reading in the evening or going over account books. Penelope found herself watching him sometimes, curious about this man who had saved her from destitution. He was handsome in a rough way, with strong features and capable hands. He was patient with his animals and fair with his men. He never made her feel uncomfortable or took advantage of her vulnerable position. When she thanked him for the doctor visits, he simply shrugged and said it was the decent thing to do. By September, Penelope's condition was beginning to show, her dresses growing tight around the middle. Mrs. Chen helped her let out the seams and showed her how to drape fabric to disguise the growing curve. Harrison never commented on it, treating her exactly the same as he always had. One evening, as Penelope was finishing the supper dishes, Harrison came into the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. "I have been thinking," he said, leaning against the counter. "Winter is coming, and when it does, that cottage is going to be cold. There is a room upstairs here in the main house that is not being used. It is bigger than what you have now, and it has a fireplace. You and your mother should move into it." "We are fine in the cottage," Penelope said automatically, though in truth she had been worrying about the winter cold and her mother's fragile lungs. "You are not fine. That cottage has gaps in the walls, and the stove is too small to heat both rooms properly. Your mother needs warmth, and you need to be close to the main house kitchen when the baby comes anyway." He had a point, and Penelope knew it. "People will talk if they find out we are living in your house." "People are already talking. I do not care what they say, and you should not either." So they moved into the main house, into a large bedroom on the 2nd floor with windows facing east toward the mountains. Catherine took the bed, and Penelope made up a comfortable pallet near the fireplace. Having her mother closer and warmer eased Penelope's constant worry, and Catherine's health continued to improve with regular medicine and good food. As autumn painted the valley gold and crimson, Penelope found herself settling into life on the ranch in a way she had not expected. The work was hard but satisfying, and there was a peace in the isolation that she had not known she needed. Harrison's ranch hands treated her with respect, and Mrs. Chen became something of a friend, teaching Penelope Chinese recipes and telling stories about her own life. Harrison himself remained somewhat enigmatic. He was kind but distant, generous but guarded. Penelope caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she could not read, but he never said anything inappropriate or made her feel threatened. If anything, he seemed determined to maintain proper boundaries, always making sure they were not alone together for extended periods, always treating her as an employee rather than anything else. But there were moments. Small moments that made Penelope's heart flutter in a way she had thought was dead after Marcus's betrayal. The way Harrison smiled when he saw her mother laughing at something Sam said over breakfast. The gentleness with which he helped Penelope carry heavy baskets of laundry. The evening he found her crying on the porch, overwhelmed by hormones and fear, and simply sat beside her in silence until she felt better. "You are going to be fine," he had said that night, his voice low and certain. "You and the baby both. You are stronger than you think. How can you be sure?" "Because you walked 10 miles looking for work when most people would have given up. Because you fought for your mother when it would have been easier to leave her. Because you get up every morning and face another day even though you are terrified. That takes more strength than most people ever find." His words had settled something inside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with being seen, really seen for the first time in her life. October brought the first frost and with it, news from town. Sam had gone to Porterville for supplies and returned with gossip that Harrison shared with Penelope over evening coffee. "Marcus Sullivan is back," Harrison said, watching her face carefully. "Apparently the Montana venture did not work out. His family is staying with the Hendersons while they figure out what to do next." Penelope felt oddly detached from the information. "Did Sam say anything about Marcus asking after me?" "No, but I imagine he will once he hears where you are. Let him hear. I have nothing to say to him." But 3 days later, Marcus Sullivan rode up the long drive to the ranch, looking travel-worn and uncertain. Penelope was hanging laundry when she saw him, and her first instinct was to run inside. Instead, she forced herself to stand still, clothespins in hand, and wait. He dismounted near the porch, and Penelope noticed he looked older, thinner, less confident than the boy who had promised her forever under the stars. His eyes widened when he saw her stomach, now unmistakably rounded beneath her apron. "Penelope," he said, and there was something like panic in his voice. "I need to talk to you. There is nothing to discuss. The baby, is it mine?" The question sent rage coursing through her. "You know it is. I sent you 3 letters telling you exactly that. You never responded. My mother. She must have hidden them. I only found them last week when I was packing my things." He took a step closer. "I did not know, Penny. I swear I did not know. Do not call me that, and it does not matter if you knew or not. You left without saying goodbye. You made promises you had no intention of keeping. I was young and stupid. My father forced me to go with them. I thought you would wait for me." "Wait for what?" "A letter that never came, a proposal that was never serious." Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from before. "I want to make this right. I will marry you. We can say the baby came early. People will talk, but eventually they will accept it." Before Penelope could respond, Harrison appeared on the porch, his presence solid and somehow threatening despite his casual stance. "Miss Zimmerman is working," Harrison said, his voice carrying clear authority. "If you have business here, state it and then leave." Marcus straightened, trying to look authoritative himself but failing. "This is private business between Penelope and myself. Penelope is under my protection, which makes it my business. She told you there is nothing to discuss. I suggest you respect that and go. You cannot keep me from talking to my child's mother." "Actually, I can. This is my property and you are trespassing. Leave now, or Sam and Lewis will help you leave." Both ranch hands had appeared from the barn, not quite approaching but clearly ready if needed. Marcus looked between them and Harrison, then back to Penelope. "Is this what you want, to live here as some rancher's charity case?" "I live here as an employee earning honest wages," Penelope said coldly. "Which is more dignity than you ever offered me. Go back to town, Marcus. Go back to your mother and your righteous friends. I do not need you." He left, but not before delivering one final barb. "Everyone knows what you are, Penny. A fallen woman living in sin with a man not her husband. That baby will grow up a bastard and it will be your fault." The words stung, more than she wanted to admit. After Marcus rode away, Penelope finished hanging the laundry with shaking hands, then went inside to find Harrison in the kitchen. "Thank you for stepping in," she said. "He is a coward. Men like that always are." Harrison poured her a cup of tea, something he had started doing after learning she could no longer stomach coffee. "But he is right about one thing. People will assume things about you living here." "I do not care what people assume. You should care, not for yourself, but for your child. A bastard label will follow that baby forever." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "There is a way to prevent that." Penelope looked at him questioningly. "You could marry me." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and unexpected. Penelope stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "It would be a marriage of convenience," Harrison said, his voice carefully neutral. "On paper only. You would have my name and the baby would be legitimate. When the child is older, we could quietly divorce if you wanted. But in the meantime, you would have protection, security, and respectability." "That is insane. Why would you do that?" "Because I could not save my sister, but I can help you. Because that child deserves better than being labeled a bastard for the circumstances of its conception. Because you have become important to this household, and I do not want to lose you to Marcus Sullivan's belated attempt at redemption." Penelope's mind raced. Marriage to Harrison would solve many problems, but it would also create a complicated tangle of obligations and expectations. "What would you get from this arrangement?" "A housekeeper I trust, someone to help run this place. Maybe, eventually, a friend." "What about love? Do you not want to marry someone you actually love?" Harrison's expression was unreadable. "I loved someone once, a long time ago. She died of cholera before we could marry. I am not looking for that kind of love again, but I would not mind having companionship and partnership. We could build something here together, Penelope. A real sanctuary for people who need it, not just you and your mother." The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Penelope thought about her child growing up with a father's name, with legitimacy and security. She thought about her mother having permanent shelter and medical care. She thought about never having to fear being cast out again. "I need time to think about this," she said. "Take all the time you need. But Marcus will be back, probably with his mother, and they will pressure you to marry him. You should decide what you want before that happens." That evening, Penelope discussed Harrison's proposal with her mother. Catherine was stunned, then thoughtful, then pragmatic. "You have feelings for him?" she asked. "I do not know. I respect him. I trust him. He has been kinder to us than anyone, but I do not know if that is enough foundation for marriage. Your father and I married after knowing each other only 3 weeks. Love came later, built on mutual respect and shared struggles. Perhaps your situation would be similar. But father loved you. Harrison said clearly this would be a marriage of convenience. He said that to make you comfortable with the idea. But I have seen how he looks at you when you are not watching. That man has feelings for you, whether he admits it or not." Penelope was not sure she believed that, but her mother's words gave her something to consider. She spent 3 days wrestling with the decision, weighing every angle, imagining every possible future. Marcus did indeed return with his mother, Mrs. Sullivan, a formidable woman who tried to bully Penelope into accepting her son's proposal. Harrison sent them both away, and their visit solidified Penelope's thinking. She found Harrison in the barn, working with a young horse he was training. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes, hope or fear or maybe both. "I will marry you," Penelope said without preamble, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, my mother lives with us permanently and receives continued medical care. Second, I want this to be a real marriage eventually, not just a paper arrangement. If we are going to do this, I want us to try to build something genuine. Third, if you ever fall in love with someone else, you tell me immediately and we figure out what to do. I will not be an obstacle to your happiness." Harrison moved closer, stopping a few feet away. "I agree to all of that. And I have one condition of my own." "What?" "You let me be a real father to your child. Not just a name on a birth certificate, but an actual parent. I do not care that the baby is not mine by blood. If we do this, that child is mine in every way that matters." Tears pricked Penelope's eyes. "You would really do that? Raise another man's child as your own?" "I would. Children do not choose their circumstances. They just deserve love and protection." "Then yes, I will marry you, Harrison Kiernan." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. And for the first time, Penelope felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby and everything to do with the man standing before her. They married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with only Sam, Lewis, Mrs. Chen, Catherine, and Doc Wilson as witnesses. Reverend Thomas refused to perform the ceremony, so they brought in a judge from Visalia who asked no questions and signed the papers without judgment. Penelope wore a simple dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, a soft green that accommodated her growing belly. Harrison wore a suit she had not known he owned, looking handsome and nervous in equal measure. When the judge pronounced them married, Harrison kissed her gently on the forehead, and Penelope felt the first stirrings of something that might, eventually, become love. The news spread through Porterville like wildfire. Mrs. Henderson declared it a scandal and said Harrison Kiernan had shown his true colors by marrying a fallen woman. Others were more charitable, suggesting it was noble of him to give the child a name. Marcus Sullivan left town again, this time for good, and the gossip eventually settled into background noise that Penelope learned to ignore. Life on the ranch adjusted to the new reality. Harrison moved Penelope's things from the guest bedroom to the master bedroom, but respected her need for space by sleeping in the room she had vacated. They took meals together, worked side by side during the day, and talked in the evenings about everything from cattle prices to childhood memories. Slowly, carefully, they built a friendship. The baby came in late January during a cold snap that froze the water troughs and dusted the valley with rare snow. Penelope's labor started in the middle of the night, and Harrison rode through the darkness to fetch Doc Wilson while Catherine stayed with her daughter, offering comfort and encouragement. The pain was worse than Penelope had imagined, wave after wave that seemed endless. She gripped her mother's hand and focused on breathing, on surviving each contraction, on the promise of holding her child when it was finally over. Harrison returned with the doctor just as dawn was breaking, and he stayed nearby even though Doc Wilson tried to shoo him away. Penelope could hear his voice through the door, low and worried, talking to Sam about something inconsequential, clearly just trying to distract himself. When the baby finally came, sliding into the world with a furious cry, Doc Wilson held up a squirming, red-faced boy with a full head of dark hair. "You have a son," the doctor announced, and Penelope burst into tears, overwhelmed by love and relief and exhaustion. They cleaned the baby and wrapped him in soft blankets, then placed him in Penelope's arms. He was perfect, tiny and fierce, with searching eyes that seemed to look right into her soul. Harrison entered the room hesitantly, as if unsure he was welcome. Penelope looked up at him and smiled. "Come meet your son," she said. He approached slowly, wonder written across his face. When he looked down at the baby, his expression melted into something tender and amazed. "He is beautiful," Harrison whispered. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Robert, after my father." "Robert Henry Kiernan." "That is perfect." Harrison reached out and let the baby grasp his finger, and little Robert held on with surprising strength. In that moment, watching her husband and son, Penelope felt something shift in her heart, a door opening that she had thought was locked forever. The first months of motherhood were exhausting and wonderful. Robert was a demanding baby, wanting to nurse constantly and sleeping in short spurts. Penelope moved through a fog of sleeplessness, doing her best to maintain her household duties while caring for an infant. Harrison helped more than she expected, walking the floor with Robert when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, and taking over some of her chores so she could rest. Mrs. Chen and Catherine also pitched in, creating a small village of support that kept the household running. Sam and Louis brought small gifts for the baby, whittled toys and soft blankets, clearly charmed by the tiny addition to the ranch. As winter gave way to spring, Penelope found herself falling more deeply into the rhythm of family life. She would watch Harrison work with the horses, his patience and gentleness, with the animals translating into tenderness with Robert. She noticed small things, like how his face lit up when he came in from the fields and saw the baby, or how he always saved the best cuts of meat for her at dinner, wanting to make sure she stayed strong for nursing. One evening in March, after Robert was finally asleep, Penelope found Harrison on the porch watching the sunset. She settled into the chair beside him, enjoying the quiet. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For saving us. For giving Robert your name. For being a real father to him. For being a good husband even though you did not have to be." Harrison turned to look at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "It has not been a hardship, Penelope. Having you and Robert here, your mother too, it has made this place feel like a home instead of just a ranch. Still, you could have married anyone, someone without baggage, without a child, without a scandal attached. I did not want anyone else." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. "I wanted you." Penelope's heart skipped. "Harrison, I know we said this was a marriage of convenience, and I am not trying to pressure you into anything, but I need you to know that what I feel for you goes beyond respect or friendship. I love you, Penelope. I think I have loved you since the day you showed up on my porch desperate for work and too proud to beg." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why did you not say anything before?" "Because you needed time. You needed to heal from Marcus's betrayal and adjust to motherhood and figure out who you are now. I did not want to complicate things by declaring feelings you might not return. But I do return them." The realization hit her as she said the words, a truth she had been avoiding because it felt too good to be true. "I love you too, Harrison. I think I have for months, but I was too afraid to admit it." He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "You do not have to be afraid, not with me. Then maybe you should move back into our bedroom, properly." His smile was slow and genuine. "I would like that." That night, Harrison carried his belongings back to the master bedroom, and they shared a bed for the first time as a true married couple. They moved together tentatively at first, relearning each other's boundaries, but the awkwardness quickly gave way to genuine passion. Penelope had expected to feel shame or guilt, memories of Marcus tainting this new intimacy, but there was none of that. This was different, better, built on trust and mutual respect rather than empty promises. Afterward, lying in Harrison's arms with moonlight streaming through the window, Penelope felt a peace she had not known was possible. Her past had led her here, through pain and shame and fear, but it had also led her to this man, this life, this unexpected happiness. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Harrison's reputation for fairness and quality stock brought steady business, and his willingness to hire people others would not, including a young Apache woman named Naylin who had been cast out from both her tribe and white society, earned him fierce loyalty from his workers. Word of the ranch's welcoming nature spread, and by the time Robert was walking and talking, several other outcasts had found their way to Harrison's door. A Chinese family fleeing persecution in Sacramento, a formerly enslaved man from Texas looking for a fresh start, a widow with 3 children and no prospects. Harrison gave them all work and housing, and Penelope helped them settle in, finding a calling she had not known existed in creating community from broken pieces. The ranch became a sanctuary, exactly as Harrison had envisioned, a place where people's pasts did not define their futures. Porterville remained largely hostile, but the ranch developed trade relationships with other towns, and eventually even some of Porterville's residents began to soften their stance when they saw the quality of life being built on the Kiernan property. Catherine's health stabilized, and she became the ranch's unofficial grandmother, beloved by all the children who came through. She taught them reading and arithmetic in the evenings, and her laughter became a regular sound in the main house. In the summer of 1884, Penelope realized she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, no shame, only joy. Harrison was thrilled, and Robert, now a rambunctious 2-year-old, seemed to understand that something special was happening even if he could not quite grasp what. Their daughter arrived in February 1885, in the same bedroom where Robert had been born. She came easier this time, and when Doc Wilson placed the tiny girl in Penelope's arms, Penelope looked up at Harrison with tears streaming down her face. "A daughter," she said. "We have a daughter. She is perfect." Harrison bent down to kiss Penelope's forehead. "What should we call her?" "Catherine Grace, after my mother and the grace that brought us together." Baby Catherine had her father's creek water eyes and her mother's dark hair, and Robert was instantly smitten with his little sister, wanting to hold her constantly and bring her his toys. Life settled into a beautiful pattern of work and family, of growth and community. The ranch expanded, adding more land and more buildings to accommodate the growing population of people who needed sanctuary. Harrison proved to be an exceptional organizer, and Penelope discovered she had a talent for mediation, helping newcomers adjust and smoothing over conflicts before they escalated. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Harrison and Penelope would sit on the porch and talk about their dreams for the future. They spoke of building a school on the property, maybe a small church too, creating a real town of their own where judgment had no place. "You ever regret it?" Penelope asked one night. "Taking me in, marrying me, all of it?" "Never. Not for a single moment." Harrison pulled her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Robert and Catherine, this family we built, this life we created. It is more than I ever hoped for." "I love you," Penelope said, the words coming easier now after years of practice. "I love you too, more than I can properly express." They watched the stars emerge, the same stars that had witnessed Penelope's first heartbreak by the creek with Marcus. But that girl seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different life. Penelope Kiernan, as she thought of herself now, was stronger, wiser, and infinitely happier than Penelope Zimmerman had ever been. In 1886, Mrs. Henderson died of a sudden illness, and surprisingly she left a letter for Penelope in her effects. The Reverend brought it to the ranch himself, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I owe you an apology," Reverend Thomas said when Penelope opened the door. "Mrs. Henderson's letter, which she wrote before her death, made clear that she regretted her treatment of you. She asked me to deliver her words and to admit that I was wrong to encourage the congregation to shun you. You have built something remarkable here, and I have been prideful and judgmental. I am sorry." Penelope accepted the apology with grace, though she did not invite the Reverend in for tea. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. Mrs. Henderson's letter was surprisingly heartfelt. She wrote about her own youth, about a sister who had found herself in circumstances similar to Penelope's, and who had been forced to give up her baby. She admitted that she had projected her own guilt and unresolved grief onto Penelope, and she praised the sanctuary that Harrison and Penelope had built. "Perhaps you are a better Christian than any of us," the letter concluded. "You have fed the hungry, sheltered the homeless, and shown mercy to the outcast. I pray you can forgive this old woman's cruelty." Penelope cried over the letter, and Harrison held her, understanding without words what the apology meant. It did not erase the pain of those early days, but it did provide a sense of closure, an acknowledgement that she had not been wrong to seek survival and dignity. As the years passed, the ranch became legendary throughout the valley. The Kiernan Sanctuary, people called it, and those in trouble knew they could find help there. Penelope and Harrison raised their children to value compassion over judgment, hard work over inherited wealth, and integrity above all else. Robert grew into a thoughtful boy who loved horses and had his father's patience. He never asked about his biological father, accepting Harrison as his dad in every sense that mattered. Catherine was fierce and bright, already reading by age 4 and asking questions that challenged the adults around her. In 1888, Penelope gave birth to twins, boys they named Samuel and Lucas, after the ranch hands who had become family. The house was full of noise and laughter, chaos and love, and Penelope often found herself pausing in her work to simply absorb the miracle of it all. Catherine Zimmerman passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1889, surrounded by her grandchildren and the daughter she had fought so hard to protect. Her death was mourned throughout the ranch, and they buried her on a hillside overlooking the valley, with a headstone that read, "Beloved mother and grandmother, who taught us the strength of love." The loss hit Penelope hard, but Harrison was there to support her through the grief, just as she had supported him through difficult times. Their marriage had grown deep roots, weathering storms and celebrating joys, becoming the kind of partnership that others aspired to. By 1890, the Kiernan Ranch supported over 30 people permanently, with more coming and going as they found their footing and moved on to build their own lives. The original sanctuary model had worked so well that similar ranches began appearing throughout California, inspired by what Harrison and Penelope had created. One evening in late summer, as they celebrated Robert's 8th birthday with a party that included half the county, Penelope stood beside Harrison watching their children play with the other ranch kids. "We did it," she said softly. "We built something that matters." "You built it," Harrison corrected. "I just provided the land, you created the heart of this place. We built it together, that is what partnership means." He kissed her temple. "True enough. So what should we build next?" Penelope considered. "A library, maybe. Somewhere all the children can access books. Education is the path out of poverty and prejudice. A library it is. We will start construction in the spring." They danced that evening under strings of lanterns, Harrison holding Penelope close as the fiddle played and their children laughed. The entire ranch celebrated, a community bound not by blood or tradition but by mutual respect and shared values. As the night wound down and the children were carried off to bed, Penelope and Harrison walked slowly back to the main house, hand in hand. "Are you happy?" Harrison asked, a question he posed periodically as if needing reassurance that she did not regret their life together. "I am more than happy," Penelope said. "I am fulfilled, I am loved, I am home. Good, because I plan on keeping you around for a very long time. That is acceptable to me." They entered their bedroom, the same room where two of their children had been born, where they had shared countless nights of conversation and intimacy, where they had built a marriage from the broken pieces of Penelope's past. Harrison pulled her close, and Penelope rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the frightened girl who had walked 10 miles seeking work, who had been judged and shunned and cast out. That girl had found not just employment but love, not just shelter but sanctuary, not just survival but purpose. "I love you," Penelope whispered. "I love you too," Harrison replied. "Always and forever." And Penelope believed him, because his actions had proven it true every single day since he opened his door and offered her a chance when no one else would. The ranch continued to grow, and their family grew with it. In the years that followed, they added more children through both birth and informal adoption, taking in those who had nowhere else to go. Their table was always crowded, their home always full of voices, and their hearts always open to those in need. Robert eventually took over managing the cattle operation, showing a natural gift for ranching that made Harrison proud. Catherine became a teacher, establishing a formal school on the property that served not just ranch children but families from miles around. The twins, Samuel and Lucas, developed a horse breeding program that became renowned throughout California. Penelope and Harrison aged together gracefully, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes, but their love remained as vital and true as it had been in those early days when it was new and uncertain. They had built a legacy not of wealth or power, but of compassion and community, and that legacy spread far beyond their property lines. In 1900, on their 16th wedding anniversary, Harrison organized a celebration that brought together everyone whose lives had been touched by the sanctuary. Over 200 people attended, coming from throughout California and beyond, to honor the couple who had shown them that mercy mattered more than judgment. During the celebration, Robert stood and raised his glass. "To my parents, who taught me that family is not defined by blood but by love. Who showed me that the measure of a person is not where they come from but what they build with their lives. Who created a place where everyone belongs." The toast was echoed by dozens of voices, and Penelope felt tears streaming down her face as she looked around at all the lives that had been changed, all the futures that had been saved, simply because Harrison had opened his door to a desperate girl one August day. That night, lying in bed with Harrison beside her, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "You remember the first time I walked up your drive?" she asked. "I remember thinking you looked terrified but determined, like you would rather die than give up. I was terrified. I thought you would turn me away like everyone else had. I almost did, not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid of what helping you might mean, how it might complicate my life." Harrison rolled onto his side to face her. "But then you looked at me with such honest desperation, and I realized that if I turned you away, I would never forgive myself. I am glad you took the risk. So am I. Best decision I ever made." They fell asleep that way, facing each other, hands clasped between them, still in love after all these years. The new century brought changes. Porterville slowly modernized, adding electricity and telephone lines, and the old prejudices began to soften as younger generations took over. The Kiernan Ranch remained a sanctuary, but it also became simply home for the large, sprawling family that called it such. Penelope continued her work helping those in need well into her 50s, always opening the door to one more person, always finding room at the table for another soul seeking refuge. Harrison supported her unfailingly, his love constant and sure, a foundation she built her life upon. Their grandchildren came, dozens of them eventually, filling the ranch with new voices and new dreams. Catherine and Lucas both married, bringing spouses who embraced the sanctuary philosophy. Robert chose to remain single, dedicating himself to the ranch, though Penelope suspected there had been a love lost somewhere that he did not speak of. In 1910, at a gathering of California ranchers, Harrison was recognized for his innovative approach to community building and his contributions to the agricultural economy. He gave a speech that surprised everyone by focusing not on ranching techniques, but on human dignity. "We have built our success on a simple principle," he said to the assembled crowd. "People flourish when they are given opportunity, respect, and support. Our ranch succeeds because we value our workers as human beings, not just labor. We invest in their futures because their success is our success. And we reject the notion that anyone is disposable or unworthy of redemption." The speech was controversial, but it was also influential. Several other ranchers approached Harrison afterward, asking for advice on implementing similar models. The Kiernan sanctuary had proven that compassion and profitability were not mutually exclusive, and that changed the conversation about labor and community throughout the valley. Penelope watched her husband with pride, this man who had started as a quiet rancher and had become a voice for justice and mercy. She thought about how far they had both come, how much they had built together, and she felt a deep gratitude for the path that had led her to him. As the years continued to pass, Penelope and Harrison settled into the quiet contentment of a long marriage well lived. They still took their evening walks, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still found joy in each other's company after decades together. In 1915, on a warm spring evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the valley. Their great-grandchildren played in the yard, and the sounds of dinner preparation drifted from the kitchen where Catherine oversaw the meal. "We have been blessed," Penelope said softly. "We have." Though blessing makes it sound like luck when it was really choice. You chose to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. I chose to open my door when I could have closed it. We chose to build something meaningful with our lives. Still, I am grateful. For all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me here. Harrison took her hand, his fingers still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to plague them both. "I am grateful, too, for your courage, your strength, your love. You made me better than I was. We made each other better. That is what love does." They sat in companionable silence as the sky turned purple and gold, the valley spreading before them in all its fertile beauty. The ranch that Harrison had bought as a lonely widower had become a thriving community. The desperate girl who had walked up the drive pregnant and alone had become a matriarch, whose influence touched hundreds of lives. It was an unlikely story, a tale of redemption and sanctuary that could only have happened in the Wild West, where people were allowed to reinvent themselves, where the past did not have to dictate the future. But it was their story, written in hard work and compassion, in love that grew from respect into something deep and unshakable. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Harrison helped Penelope to her feet, and they walked inside together, ready for whatever years remained. Their legacy was secure, built in the lives they had changed, in the children they had raised, in the community they had created from nothing but faith and determination. The Kiernan sanctuary would outlast them, continuing to welcome those in need long after its founders were gone. But the true miracle was not the institution they had built. It was the love story that had grown from broken beginnings into something beautiful and enduring, proof that second chances were real, and that redemption was always possible for those brave enough to seek it. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Years later, Robert would tell his own children the story of how their grandmother had arrived at the ranch with nothing but courage and desperation, and how their grandfather had seen past scandal to recognize someone worth saving. He would tell them about the sanctuary that grew from one act of mercy, and how love could flourish in the most unlikely soil. The story would be passed down through generations, changing slightly with each telling, but always maintaining its core truth. That kindness matters. That judgment destroys while mercy builds. That family is defined by choice and love rather than blood. That everyone deserves a second chance. And somewhere in that story, in the legacy of the Kiernan sanctuary, Penelope and Harrison's love continued to live on, an eternal testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of redemption, even in the harshest landscape of the wild American West. The ranch stood for decades after both Harrison and Penelope passed, eventually becoming a historical landmark that scholars studied as an example of progressive community building in 19th-century California. But for those who had lived there, who had been saved by its open doors and generous hearts, it was simply home. The place where Penelope Zimmerman became Penelope Kiernan, where outcasts became family, where the whole town may have turned against a pregnant girl, but one cowboy turned his ranch into sanctuary, and in doing so, created a love story that would inspire generations to come.